right, good afternoon, everybody. So we're going to do a panel discussion. I have on stage with me one of the pairs of moderators that were in each room, and we will treat this a little bit just like one last roundtable that all of you get to watch, and I will be asking them to tell us a little bit about the results of their discussion. Just real quick to introduce them. For the Who group, we have Dr. Suchis Nigna-Deb. For What, we have Johan Pinkrayach. For When, we have Jonathan Rudd. For Where, we have Koji Suganuma. And for Why, we have Sarah Fuller. All right. So for everybody on the panel, what I wanted to start with was, I know that as we went through the rooms, a lot of what happened was the discussion started by defining what was meant by each of these W's. And so if we'll just go down the table, we'll start with you, Shuchi. And if you can just tell us a little bit about how your group defined your topic and a little bit about the topic as it was discussed.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity. We had many great discussions, and actually it was difficult to categorize who just by saying that the road users or saying that the people who will ride the vehicles. So some group actually differentiated between direct users and indirect users. Direct users being the passengers, the operators, and indirect users like the pedestrians, bicycles, or other vehicles driven by human drivers. But there were also discussion about like who are going to be responsible for these vehicles, who are going to own these vehicles, or who are going to get the most benefit out of these vehicles. So we discussed a lot, and we came up with lots of different categories. I would like to share some of them. Like the people talked about who will get the most profit out of this autonomous vehicle. So it was mostly the transportation companies or truck companies, logistics. Those were the answers that came out from people. And also, like, people talked about who will get the most benefit, like what will be, who can use this, like taking the help from those vehicles. And it was elderly people or disabled people. So there were some differences between thoughts in the discussion, and we'll discuss maybe in the next question. But also the most interesting topic was like who will own these vehicles and who will take the responsibility. So.
Johan?
Yes, so in our group, well, the original question was, what is the purpose of autonomous driving? But we thought that if it is what is the purpose, it's very close to the why. So we had to define what is what. And so we came up with, three main things. First thing is what people want or need. And the other thing, what is of the most interest, economically. And the other thing is what is actually possible technologically. And so in the end, what will be autonomous driving, autonomous vehicle is what kind, overlap with all these what. We ended discussing about what kind of services, what kind of platform, what kind of services, and what level of automation also. And we talked a little bit about the when also, because to know what it will be, we had to understand when and the timing also. So we discussed a lot about acceptance of the public. and the difference in culture also that can impact what will be autonomous driving depending on regions, or what it will be, or it will affect the progress or the rate of adoption. So anyway, I think there will be further questions, but so what will be autonomous driving really depends on who, when, where, everything. So we had a very wide range of discussion, but okay. Thank you.
John?
Now, for the wind topic, as he discussed, it was hard to really disconnect wind from kind of the what and some of the other areas, and so we really tried to focus. But with the wind, it was a matter of interpretation of what was meant by wind. We had two main, I guess, interpretations of wind. The first one is, when will it be used? What's a good case scenario for using this technology? And the other one was, when will it be available on the market, or just available for consumption? And so with that, yeah, we have the two main categories. When it would be used, or a big variety of cases, ranging from just emergency situations, care for elderly and people who can't just functionally drive for themselves, as well as tour guide. And I thought an interesting one was using it as a driving aid. So if you're new to a country and you don't know the driving rules of the road, then you can use this to help train you. And so that was really interesting. Now on the flip side of that, when will it be available? I think the underlying question to that was, what level of autonomous driving are we talking about? I think that kind of had everybody split, but once we were able to hone in on a level and agree to what it means, then we can at least have a loose conversation about it. So for when, we looked at a few of the factors that affected the wind, like public perception, regulation, legislation, the technology, and industry and commercialization. And for the most part, with all the groups that I spoke with, it seemed that public perception was the main factor that affected wind. It didn't mean that the other ones weren't important. It was just that one was the key driver to fast adoption versus taking a bit longer to do so. And we were able to also get some statistics just to see how everybody felt about it. And of course, this is subjective. The question was, when do you think different levels of autonomous driving systems will be available? And these are some of the results. And I'm not sure if our definitions correspond with the SAE level definitions, but we kind of have them off to the side. And you kind of see that, I was surprised that level 5 didn't get more love. But I mean, it's understandable. It takes a lot of infrastructure, a lot of different things that have to work together to get a full system like that. And another trend we saw, that it may not be expressed in the data here, but there was I guess more of an acceptance of developing linearly from level 1 to level 3, but then maybe a lot of groups wanted to skip level 4 and jump to level 5 in terms of what would happen sooner. And so I thought that was an interesting thing as well.
Okay, my group try to find out about where, and same to other groups, we have difficulty to define what where means. So the discussion starts from there. And we have found many aspects to define the where, like the we can do, or like the possibility things, in technology-based possibility things, or demand-based, like the what category or what kind of the field we need the autonomous vehicle, like dangerous, dull, difficult. So we call it 3Ds. So 3D places are mostly required. Also, maybe this is not in parallel to these aspects, but the agriculture or some other things, we need autonomous vehicle, or farming, we need autonomous vehicle to help the people to use. And a very important aspect was introduced from one of the groups, that was the economic aspect. So who needs, because of the money or efficiency, so the economic issue is also important idea to talk about the where. And some result from our discussion, so regarding to 3D, sorry about that, regarding to possibility, logistics is one of the early adapter, we think. Of course, as you see, platooning and other technology are introducing now, so it's coming soon. But platooning sounds like the first step, but still there are many issues we need to think about that was found, especially from the help of the officers from the state troops. We learned so much about that. And also regarding to 3Ds, for dangerous place and dull place or dull job and difficult job, autonomous vehicle can help it. So dangerous is like the mining or at mine, autonomous vehicle can work it. And dull things are like the like driving on the motorway or highway, like so it directly relates to logistics. And also some people insisted dull things. One of the dull thing is parking. So autonomous parking is also the help. And it does not mean just the parallel parking or back-in parking, and automatically find parking place or automatically hovering is another thing we want to realize. Difficult thing is many things, but one of the issues is sending our probe to the Mars and let the car, should I call car or not, but let the vehicle explore on the Mars or on the moon is also a difficult thing. So these kind of things are discussed.
Very good. Sarah?
So we had, thank you. So we had the why question, which seems to kind of cover a lot of different groups and seems that we may be infringed on some things. But the why definition was actually pretty easy, to define for our group. We put together some questions you can see here to kind of guide some of our discussions, along with percentages of people of our groups that were interested in that now or in the future being once the technology has been matured, we know it's safe, it's been adopted, the now being right now within the next year or two with the current technology. So you can see some percentages there of who wants it, who doesn't want it. But our main discussion points for why do we need autonomous driving? We saw yesterday that 95% of vehicle accidents are caused by human error. So safety is a big thing, and safety came up in every one of our sessions of why do we need autonomous driving? Why do we need some kind of service like this? Is it safety? Traffic flow was another big one. Environmental concerns, cars stay parked, 90% of the time, so could the car be, shared and used somewhere else during that 10% of the time that it's being used? Can it be used somewhere else for that 90% that it's normally parked? We also had some discussions on car sharing, ride sharing, vehicle sharing versus autonomous. You know, what do we need? Why do we really need the autonomous, or is it that we really want a shared vehicle type service? We discussed personal ownership. Are we getting away from that personal ownership of vehicles where it's more of a service and a contract? You basically buy a mobility contract similar to your cell phone provider, right? That's for all the members of your house. Another why that we came up with was, I know personally I'm always running late. So if I can jump in that autonomous vehicle and it take me to work, I can focus on continuing whatever I'm needing to do to get ready for work, whether I need to be on a conference call, whatever it might be. The vehicle can become an extension of your home or your office, anything like that, and increase your productivity, improve your lifestyle to some degree because the stress of driving has been alleviated. So we had a lot of pretty broad discussions in our group about why do we need it, why do we want it, why do we think we need it, things like that.
So, Sarah, I know when we were looking at the survey results, that was one, the Y group was one where we had a clear winner in terms of the popularity of survey responses, and it was that the importance of the cost or the monetary benefit of autonomy. But I know in our group in particular, we didn't necessarily discuss that in detail.
Yeah.
Was there a lot of discussion
There
of
really,
cost?
there really wasn't. In some of these questions here asking, you know, do you want or need autopilot now? There was some discussion, well, if I can afford it now, yeah, I might want it. There was some discussion on cost in terms of, is it something that's actually going to become more of a luxury item, or is it going to become more of a lower end item? So we had some discussion about hotels, for example, where you don't have the human interaction in the service, and it's cheaper because you don't have that human interaction and service. So would autonomous vehicles be something like that, where it's actually at the budget end because you don't have the service or the comfort that you would? But no, in general, cost really was not a huge discussion point for any of our groups.
So I asked the rest of the panel, did any of you have a discussion in particular about the expense or cost? Did that play into when or who might be using it or anything?
Well, we discussed a little bit about the cost, but it was not actually an issue in the end. For individuals, okay, at first it will be expensive, but it will come to a reasonable price at a time. Obviously, any technology does that. So, well, if it had to be tomorrow, okay, cost would be a big issue. But if we are not just thinking about tomorrow, did not seem to be a big issue on the, and that's about individual users. But when you come to logistics, delivery service, of course, the cost of the human cost actually was a discussion. Not the cost of the vehicle. We clearly see that the cost of the vehicle will be always smaller than the human cost if you can remove human wear. We don't need a person. So that's what we had about the cost in our table. Yeah.
I also want to add something here. So we also talked about cost, like these vehicles will be very expensive at this point of time. And I just agree that with time it will go down. But now this point, if we want to provide some service with autonomous vehicle, we need to think about different kind of services based on the earning level of people. Maybe some rich people would like to own a vehicle, or like to have services that will provide some luxury service items with that. Like in a shuttle, maybe they can have some other kind of advantages inside the vehicle that can give them comfort, that can give them pass their time, you know. So they would like to have this kind of service because they can afford that. But for the people, the poor people or elderly people who doesn't have any source of earning, they would just care about the transport. So for them, maybe just like a public transportation, with just to move them from one place to another will be enough. So that can be cost effective if we can schedule some kind of service like that. So at this point, if we want to provide service, it should be based on people's earning level, and it should be different kind of services.
We talked about costs some for, I guess, different stakeholders or the different areas. I think in terms of the technology, we saw that initially that some of these levels of technology are available, but higher costs, and so they're going to go into more luxury products. But I think one thing that was consistent across the groups was as long as there was a business case for it, then the cost wasn't really something that held back the technology from being available and developed. So as long as the business case was in place, whether it be on the industry side or even some of the officers just kind of opened my eyes to another world, which is kind of their side. I mean, there has to be kind of a cost or a business case associated with implementing the technology there as well. So.
Yeah, my group didn't talk about the cost itself, but we talked about the benefits. So that's, for example, if one area autonomous vehicle is applied, is that beneficial or not? Is one of the viewpoint we did it. And of course, many points are found, and especially when the volume of traffic changes so much. In that case, using the autonomous vehicle or shared autonomous vehicle is better than owning the car. But in another aspect, still people want to keep his or her car. It's possibility or near possibility. We don't know about the younger people, younger generation, what they will feel. But at least the elderly people still want to keep at least their license. And we can figure even they have difficulty to drive or keep driving, still they may want to keep their cars. Okay.
So cost is one potential condition, and I know Jonathan may have most to say about this, but were there some conditions that are going to limit acceptance of autonomy or the roadmap for autonomy that were discussed in your groups? Go ahead.
Okay. So in terms of conditions, like I said, we went over quite a few, from public perception to legislation regulation, to the technology itself, to the industry. And in terms of conditions, now I'll just focus on kind of the public perception perspective topic. Some of it's just kind of getting over old habits. I mean, some of us like to drive, and so trying to provide an option was discussed for different people to be able to choose an autonomous system versus not, was a factor. Let's see. And of course, legislation, regulation, figuring out who's going to accept liability for accidents when they occur. That was a big topic of conversation. I don't want to take up all the...
In the what, we had a few points on the conditions too. So it's almost the same as you about public acceptance, and it seemed to be linked a lot to the safety. Safety seems to be one major point in the public acceptance. They don't want to be at risk, more risk than they are at the moment. But well, it didn't seem to be, well, safety, the main thing that will, the main benefit actually of autonomous driving. Well, it has to be better than the current safety level. But so the other conditions were more about the benefit of autonomous driving. And sorry, I'm losing what I'm wanting to say. Yeah, so one point was, well, it has to provide something helpful and useful to the driver and to the users. And so that was the main condition. So for individuals, again, few points that came where autonomous driving can provide autonomy and mobility to people who do not have it, who lost it, like elderly people or young people that do not have it yet but could get it earlier or for a longer time if autonomous driving was there. So this kind of benefit to people, and then, as I said just before, too, is economical interest. So it has to be, well, you have to have a business case anyway. So the business is one condition, and the other one, like regulations, was another interesting topic, and it links to some technical and issues and way to go forward also for manufacturers. Well, you will have new licenses system. You cannot drive an autonomous vehicle like you drive your car at the moment, so you will have to have evolution of the license, but it cannot go without any standardization of the interface of the vehicle. So these regulations on the driver and on the vehicle was also one condition. Yeah, I think that's it.
So we found some concerns and conditions about people's thoughts on who will be using autonomous vehicle. So actually, most of our in our group, most of the discussion was based on the people who cannot drive, like elderly people or children, or like handicapped people. They will use an autonomous car and it will be useful for them. But there was also concern about, like, these people also may need some kind of services. So they may need need help with their belongings, or they may need some assistance, like somebody with them, because with children there should be somebody with them. So for these kind of things, like, maybe it's not autonomous service that's what is required, it's just some kind of service they need. So those were the condition with the elderly people, although most of the people were saying that elderly people will get the most benefit out of it. And also we found what will happen with driving license system. So now somebody will operate the car, do they need the driver license? And also who will be responsible for the accidents, just like everybody is talking about that, and who will give the evaluation for the vehicles that they are now safe to be on the road. They are now safe to be used, you know. So those kind of conditions we found in our discussion. And another very interesting point came out about media, that there should be accidents, of course, with even autonomous vehicle, and just one happened on March, so we all know about that. And we need to actually very carefully identify what happened, and also we need to discuss, like, if it was possible, if there was a human driver to control the accident. So the media should not only focus on that the autonomous vehicle did that accident, also they should compare if the human driver was able to control that. So those kind of discussion also was there, and they were very interesting, because if we can show people that we actually, the accident that happened, it was because of some reasons, that some safety system was not engaged, but it was not possible for even the human driver to control the accident. So we brought that point, this autonomous system, to that point that at least the vehicle could control the accident. So in that way, we have to, like, the media has to describe things to the people so that the acceptance that we all are talking about, it doesn't grow in one day. But if we scare them with the incident reports, actually we'll go other way. So that's another important topic we found.
So I'll just jump in and ask a different question that kind of leads from that. I know in some of the groups I was in, Professor Okuda brought up that there are potential reasons why we would not use autonomous driving. So was there some discussion, and if somebody has some topics on reasons we wouldn't, reasons or locations or when we would not be using autonomous driving?
Sure. So we talked a little bit about autonomous driving. When would we not use it? Why would we not use it? You know, obviously safety, if it's not proven, if it's not been tested, you know, we're not going to use it. It brought up how do you do the testing? How, you know, you're essentially doing human subject testing, right? And so the driver potentially will sign off and say, I agree that I'm using this system and I'm testing it, but what about the pedestrians or the rest of the people that they come in contact with? So that was a delicate situation of why would I potentially not use it? Location, you know, we talked a lot about rural versus urban areas. Is there a benefit to using it, you know, between autonomous or ride sharing, anything like that? There's a difference whether you're in a large metropolitan city or you're out in the country, you know, 40 miles from the nearest town. Is that a situation where you would want it or potentially not want it? Inclement weather, you know, it seems like that would be a great benefit, that I can't see, but the car has sensors and can potentially see, but do we know? I mean, it hasn't been tested. Again, it's back to the testing situation. How are the sensors? How is the car going to react in fog? You know, can it see any better than a person can? So yeah, we had a little bit of discussion on why you would not use an autonomous vehicle. Driving for the sake of driving. You know, what if I just want to take a Sunday stroll? I don't have an end location in mind. I just want to drive. Autonomous driving maybe is not what you're looking for in that situation. So, sure.
My point still.
Go ahead.
The points that I have kind of go in line with that. Just whenever there's a situation where I guess the system doesn't have time to learn or doesn't have the context for that situation. I mean, that was pretty much one of the principles for every situation we talked about where you wouldn't use an autonomous system. And so, and then also emergencies. We talked about, that one kind of went both ways. Sometimes you want it to use it in an emergency situation. When the officers talked about Hurricane Katrina and being able to utilize people to help people and then just let the cars do the job of driving. That would be great. But then again, you have that flip side of what if it doesn't work as planned? You don't want to have to worry about a car in addition to helping these people. And so.
Okay. And in my group, we discussed about where we should not use the autonomous vehicle. And some of the comments are from where the sensor doesn't work is the biggest issue. So there are many obstacles against the sensors, but especially for some dust and also particles are bad for laser, LiDAR, and including the vision sensing. And sometimes for radar, some condition makes it difficult. So under this condition, the autonomous vehicle should not be operated. And also, very close proximity with a human being is a dangerous place to operate. Like the forklift that tries to unload from the truck. It is okay if nobody is there, only the autonomous forklift is working, but if some other people are working around the truck, human behavior is very hard to predict. So we shouldn't bring in the autonomous forklift to unload the baggage. That is some idea.
No, I think you covered what we discussed about. There was, of course, the topic of I want to drive. But there are cases where I don't want to drive to, in the congested traffic in the big cities. I'm okay if I just get a ride. But when I want to drive, I want to drive too. So there was that point of being able to keep control. If I'm not able to keep the control when I want to have control, then that could be a stopper. But that was mainly the main thing. So it's not just about the vehicle driving or turning and accelerating for you. It was also about the routing. If we go to, for example, level 5, there was that discussion about the fact that we would need a global traffic control system to optimize the traffic. So it's not just vehicle, it's a traffic system that we are talking about. And even in that case, okay, the optimal route for everyone to be at an average good travel time is that route. But actually, if I go that route, only my vehicle, I would arrive earlier, or it would be a better route for me. So, well, in that case, maybe I want to keep control of that, and well, there are these kind of issues we talked about, yes.
So we are talking about this who will be using autonomous car. So at that point, we found some interesting thought, especially from our researcher from Japan, that some of the people there who are like handicapped, blind, are not able to drive. Now that they have this autonomous driving facility, they want to have this pleasure of driving these vehicles, which I found very difficult to accept, you know. But yeah, in this way we can help these people mentally, of course, these elderly people who are now who have to give up their freedom of driving and getting in depression. Maybe there can be some wheel or something that they are feeling that they are driving, but they are not. So that kind of interesting thoughts we found in our discussion, that now blind people also want to drive. And especially there were things that not everybody want to accept the autonomous driving, the level 5 or 4. They want to have some kind of driver assistance systems. So, but there were different thoughts, different comments in this topic, that some people think it's difficult to take over the control and when they are assisting with these driver assistance systems, and it's easier just to give the vehicle the control. So it's just very different comments we get from this topic. I can't make a comment that, yeah, most of the people thought that level 5 or 4 was the best option. But yeah, some people now maybe get the pleasure of driving. Well, they are not driving, but they think they are.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the cultural, potentially cultural differences. Were there, this is an international group, were there some differences in what you heard from the U.S. attendees and Asian attendees? Or?
Yes, there were very much different opinions from some Asian researchers and from the researcher from USA here. So there were, like we were talking about school bus, making the school bus autonomous for our kids, but they think that they don't need it because their kids just walk to the school. Just like that, there are very different human behavior outside the vehicle in Asian countries. So when we are making these vehicles in USA, we are thinking our human behavior here. So when we, but in USA also, in different states, like there are many people, many international people living in here, and they are different in behaviors. So the cultural difference in their attitude as driver, as road users, and also like their expectations from this autonomous vehicle, these services, should be something important we all can talk about.
Anybody else want to take that one?
Yeah, we talked about which region is the easiest to start the autonomous vehicles, and the answer was they answered which is the all of them say my region is most difficult. So the American people say, US is so difficult because of the jurisdiction is different and some other reasons. And also Japanese say, we are so hard to do that one. And European people say, our road is narrow, so it is hard. So many reasons exist not to do. Okay.
So, in a lot of our discussions, we were asking those questions that you saw earlier, you know, do you want this? Do you need it? Do you need it now? Do you want it in the future? And it seems that Americans potentially have some control issues, and that the Americans and even some of the Europeans in our groups really said, I still want a steering wheel. I still want to be able to drive. I still want to be able to be in control of my vehicle. It seems that more of the Asian contingent were happier to say, I don't really care about driving that much. I just need to get there. I don't care how I get there. I don't care if somebody else is driving. I don't care if it's my own personal vehicle. I just need to get from point A to point B somehow. But, you know, the Americans, and granted, the Americans that are here, you know, we're all in Starkville, Mississippi, so we're all pretty used to a little bit more of a rural area. Perhaps it would be slightly different if we were in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, New York, where parking was horrendous, driving in general was horrendous. We may be more open to some of those things, but it seems that Americans really just like to drive. You know, we want to be able to take the risks and drive really fast if we want to, and some of the autonomous options maybe would not allow that. So.
Well,
Yeah, we did not talk a lot about the differences, but there are, and you talked about the differences on the road conditions and the driver himself or herself. And what I could add is because all vehicles won't be autonomous at the same time, you have to take into account the other drivers, and depending on the regions, their behavior may be very different. So you may have a lot of safe drivers. I think I live in Japan. I think there are quite safe drivers compared to France, for example. Germany, I'm not sure. Maybe the rules are, I think, strict. So I guess that you have a lot of safe drivers. Anyway, and in other countries you don't have that. So that may affect also a lot. Because of this mix between autonomous vehicle and non-autonomous vehicle, you may have very different challenges, and will probably affect how fast it can be adopted. If we just consider that, of course, there is all the economical issues depending on the regions too, but culturally, it's the other drivers are an important point.
John, did you have anything on the culture in your group, or no?
I think these guys pretty much hit on the main points.
Okay.
Other than that, I noticed that different regions had different pros and cons. Some of them had a better legislative, regulative environment. Others had better incentives. Like in Japan, we talked about the Olympics happening and just to kind of drive for at least some level of autonomous vehicle to occur. Talked a little bit about laws in Europe versus the U.S., as well as the industry and how the industry in the U.S. with Tesla and Waymo pushing boundaries, kind of affecting when it would come about. But for the most part, it seemed that each country had its own pro and con.
So we're about out of time for this, but I'll ask one more. Just if thinking back over the last 2 days, did you have a particularly surprising or interesting topic that came up that you'd like to share with everyone?
Yeah, I have one. Okay. What made me surprised was the applicable place for autonomous vehicle. And I already mentioned about space, but the other place is ocean and also the off-road. I'm so surprised to learn about off-road. And if off-road autonomous vehicle is realized, so it is true level 5. So, and fortunately, one of my colleague was doing the research for that one, so we learned about so much about the importance of the running off-road and how can we use it like the search and rescue operation after the avalanche or after some mudslide, or because we can use when the road becomes not road, but off-road vehicle can help people. That is a very big issue. Okay.
So we had a couple things in our group, and one that I've never actually even thought about, people that get motion sickness. You know, potentially those are the people that really like to drive. You know, they need to drive because in some form or fashion it helps with their motion sickness. So how do they respond and react in an autonomous type vehicle? Additionally, we talked about markets and production. So if we start thinking about mobility as a service, potentially the production of cars will go down. What happens to labor forces? Do we retrain them into becoming, working in a different sector? They're probably not going to become the software engineers writing code for this, but if I'm sharing a vehicle, I want it to be clean when I get in it, so maybe they become car cleaners. Maybe there's a resurgence in car washes. You know, there's a whole lot of different impacts that are far-reaching within markets and demand and production changes that, society impacts that we were really kind of concerned about, that, one leads to another, and it's kind of this snowball effect, and things can drastically change. So the last thing that I thought was really interesting, we talk about trust and trusting the technology, trusting the system, but a lot of people actually said, I know I'm not a good driver. I don't trust myself. I want to just get rid of all risk and responsibility and let the machine do it. You know, so it's trusting in your own abilities and the lack thereof that was pretty interesting to think about. I just don't want the responsibility of driving. I want it to lie somewhere else, which then brings up the question, does it lie with the auto manufacturer? If there's something happens, where does the responsibility lie if it's not the person riding? So, lack of trust in your own abilities was not really something I was expecting.
I don't think you have anything
Sure.
surprising.
Not surprising to them, because it's, I think one of the things that surprised me was we talked about the development of the systems. Which one do you think would come first? Which one is most desired? Which one will become available when? And we talked about whether or not there was going to be a linear trend in terms of the development of the different levels over time. And just the jump from level 3 to, I actually had a few groups that were like, we don't want level 4 because I don't want a car to wake me up out of my sleep and all of a sudden I have to take control. It was either I'm paying some attention before it gets to that point, or you have complete control. And so I think that was surprising to me. And actually, another thing was just the number of people who like driving. Once you talk about level 5 and you say you have absolutely no control, you're like, well, I actually kind of like driving a little bit, that kind of thing. So it's, I don't know, just having an option may be something that was interesting to me. Thanks.
Surprising, I'm not sure it's surprising, but yeah, but we are talking about autonomous driving, and almost everyone seemed to not want an autonomous vehicle. But it's okay to build them and sell them, okay? No, well, the interest for autonomous driving, but it's, yeah, clearly on an individual point of view, it's, well, I'm not in a hurry. That seems to be kind of feeling I got. But clearly, if it can save lives, and in some cases, I mean, up to level 3 at least, everyone seemed to be okay to have this more safe vehicle, but not fully autonomous. And one other point, there was that kind of discussion about platooning, and more generally, okay, we can do it, so we do it, but do we really have to do it? And if autonomous driving was never going to happen, so there was these topics too that were interesting. It's always good to have an opinion on the other side. So yes, and if I can talk a bit more about platooning, do we have time? I'm not sure how it started exactly. For me, it seems like technically it was probably the most obvious way to go, because it's basically following something which is easier than just almighty driving. But then compared to towing, well, it's not more energy efficient. You can, if platooning is good for long distances too, so why not just meet at some place, take the cargo, and have just one driver driving the platoon with several trailers, and have the other driver going back to where they have to take new cargo and just do that. These small trips and long trip with just one driver and a lot of trailers. So anyway, there was that comparison that was interesting too. But we can do it as autonomous driving, so it is going on. But I'm just wondering how it will go in the end. Don't want to, say we should not do it, but I've not been working on it. But that was interesting.
I think that actually goes to the purpose of the conference in finding the right purpose for autonomous driving to make sure that we are developing good technology that has the right benefits. Do you have a interesting topic to wrap us up?
I kind of described all the interesting topics with all of my answers, but I would say talking about this, who is responsible for if there is an accident or anything, it was a big issue. Everybody was concerned about that, and everybody was really upset, who we should rely on if we have an accident riding one of these vehicles. And we had some ideas, but I don't know where it will go in future. There was people who were talking about vehicle manufacturer, software developers, car designers, or the people who will own the business. Those people are the evaluator who will give the evaluation report about the vehicle. So those kind of topics, actually, I didn't think about much as who, but yeah, that's really a big issue. Also about the driver assistance system, a researcher from Germany who was talking about that 7 to 8% people in Germany are colorblind. So if these vehicles are helping them, they should help them with some kind of images for the colorblind people as driver assistance systems. That's another good topic maybe for them to research on, I think, because yes, if we are getting some kind of warning and if it helps to reduce accident for these people who are colorblind, obviously we should also think about this kind of option to have for them.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you to the panelists. I'd like to give them a round of applause. And thank you to the other moderators and to everyone that has participated in the roundtables over the last 2 days. All right.